Thank you for once again joining us for yet another video. This one will be on the topic of what is in a vaccine. So I know a lot of people are concerned, and there's a lot of different kind of conspiracy theories as to what is actually inside of a vaccine. So hopefully today's short little video will give you a little bit more peace of mind and kind of give you a better understanding of what is actually found within the COVID-19 vaccine. So what we have here is a quite extensive list of different ingredients. And there are a lot of ingredients on here that look like they would be potentially kind of scary. But we should not be nervous because this is actually not the recipe for the COVID-19 vaccine. Instead, this is what is in macaroni and cheese. So I put this in here to really highlight the idea that we give a lot of scrutiny, rightly so, to what's in a vaccine, but a lot of the components that are in a vaccine, even though they sound scary, are not actually any different than what we find in foods that we eat on a daily basis. So here is the actual ingredient list for the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine that has been approved by the FDA. The first one would be the mRNA. This is what is going to actually give you immunity, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. The next group of ingredients fall under what we consider to be lipids. Now, dietary fats are a type of lipid, and we'll go into these lipids, and even though the names look pretty impressive and kind of scary, we'll kind of give you an idea that they're really not all that scary at all. And then finally, we have this category that we're calling suspension. Realistically, this is the fluid component primarily made up of water with trace amounts of a bunch of different, essentially, salts and sugars, and we will see why those are important as well. So the first component is the most important component, and that is the mRNA, which stands for messenger ribonucleic acid. Now, I think everyone is at least semi-familiar with the idea of DNA. However, I think less people understand the role of mRNA. So one of the things that we should understand is that DNA is found inside of your cells, found inside of your nucleus. DNA contains genes. Genes are going to be converted into what's known as messenger RNA, and then messenger RNA is what gets converted into protein. So mRNAs are an extremely normal part of your cellular biology. They're found in every cell within your body. The mRNA that is used in the vaccine is going to be mRNA that codes for protein in SARS-CoV-2, the virus. Now, there will be another video that discusses exactly how this works, but the big idea is that the mRNA that is from the virus is what the body is going to use to create immunity. So we'll come back to this topic in a subsequent video. But again, it's an mRNA from the virus, and it is this mRNA that is really the important part of the vaccination process. And it's also really important to note that mRNA is very unstable. So typically, mRNA is only found within individual cells, and that mRNA gets converted to protein. It's not natural for mRNA to just be floating around through the body, such as when a vaccine is introduced. So in order for this mRNA to work and to have its job as a vaccination tool, it needs to be stabilized. So if we were to take the SARS-CoV-2 mRNA and simply inject it into the arm, what would really quickly happen is that mRNA would be broken apart by multiple means, including by proteins produced by cells to chop up kind of this extra mRNA. So the mRNA would do nothing on its own. And that's where the next component comes in, the lipids. So the lipids, as I said before, include things like dietary fats that you ingest all the time, right? There are going to be two main purposes for the lipids in this vaccine. The first is to assist with the uptake of the mRNA into host cells. So this essentially means that the lipids will help the cell take that vaccine inside of them where it is needed for the vaccine to actually kind of provide its function. The second is that it's going to give the mRNA a little bit of stability and protection against those cellular defenses. So here we can see again our SARS-CoV-2 mRNA, but this time rather than injecting it nakedly into the body, we're going to surround it in this lipid layer. And those three different lipids that are in the vaccine are all going to function to essentially protect that mRNA upon injection and then subsequently help that mRNA get taken into the host cells. And that again is going to lead to more stability of the mRNA and allow it to be more immunoreactive, meaning allowing the immune system to form a response, which is the key portion of a vaccination. Now, before we move on, I should also make a really quick note about the second lipid in this list. Now, the second lipid is also known as PEG. And the reason we need to make note of it is that a small subset of people will be allergic to PEG. So when people have adverse side effects, including allergic reactions to the vaccine, it is actually PEG that typically is the culprit. Now, again, is this something that you should be afraid of? No, because we know exactly what we need to do as medical professionals to treat an allergic reaction. And that is one of the important parts of going through the vaccination clinical trials, is that you can identify these potential rare events. And because they are already identified, then we already know how to treat them in the very rare chance that they do in fact occur. Right, the third component is what we have labeled here as suspension. And primarily this is water, right? Because we're injecting in this essentially what looks like fluid by the naked eye. We know now that it contains many different components, but it's primarily water that makes up our suspension medium. So the goal of the suspension medium are kind of threefold. The first is we want to be able to suspend the lipid-encased mRNA. Basically, we're dissolving that mRNA into a fluid so we can inject it in. Goal number two, we're going to try to match the important salt levels within the body. Think of a saline drip, right? So we want to make sure that what we're injecting in is not going to cause any harm. And part of that is if we were to inject pure water into the body, that actually would not be really all that good for the body. It would actually be harmful. So we want to make sure that we add some salts so that it is going to be kind of in equilibrium with what the body normally is found at. And then finally, some of these components are also going to aid in the uptake of that mRNA, that kind of lipid-encased mRNA by the host cells. So we have, again, suspension fluid, primarily water, but it's going to contain things like potassium chloride. Potassium chloride was, or is, I should say, found in a lot of different food items naturally. It was actually found within the recipe for macaroni and cheese that we showed on the first slide. Right? Monobasic potassium phosphate. Now that one sounds a little bit scary, but that's really a common food additive. We have sodium chloride, which is simply salt. Dibasic sodium phosphate dihydrate. Again, sounds scary, but this is a common component of water softeners, and it's also found in many of the canned food items that you probably already have in your pantry, including condensed milk. And then don't forget sugar in the form of sucrose. So again, a lot of kind of talk out there of there being a lot of components of the vaccine that are very harmful, and really it's not the case. Right? And one of the things that you will hear a lot about is that there is a component of the vaccine that is found in the lethal injection. And that is true. Potassium chloride is in fact found in the lethal injection. However, it is also found in macaroni and cheese. So again, it's not going to be harmful at the extremely low levels that we are using it in the vaccination process. All right, so that is another lecture, and hopefully that helped to kind of ease your mind on some of the components and what they do in terms of what is actually in the COVID-19 vaccine.